Hello, and thanks for coming along to And We Have an Office Dog, the digital agency podcast where we talk to agency owner-directors and learn more about what makes them tick. From the things that make them similar to the things they'd rather have known sooner, where they've had success and where they've learned some hard lessons. All will be revealed with your host, Chris Simmons, the agency coach, and he'll be talking to a different awesome agency person in each episode, asking them 4 questions and seeing where the conversation takes us over the next 25 minutes. Okay, so let us begin. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, voiceover guy. And on today's podcast, we've got Lisa Paasche, former founder of Verve Search, and now the founder and CEO of Ecte Vision. Hi, Lisa.
Hello. Hi.
I got there eventually with the pronunciations there. So, but firstly, very quickly, and we'll go into this later. What does Ecte mean?
Ecte means real and honest in Norwegian.
Fantastic. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that really shortly. So in the first instance, if you can give me a plug of what you do now specifically, and kind of a little bit of your pedigree / heritage, give us a plug. Who is Lisa?
So now I run a mentoring and advisory business for agencies and CEOs wanting to be more of who they are and help them grow their business to a potential exit. And then I was CEO and founder of Verve Search for 12 years, which I grew to 57 people, and we sold to Omnicom Media Group in 2017.
Crikey, that's 57 people to keep track of. Well done. So as with every podcast, we've got 4 questions. We'll see where the next 25 minutes or so takes us. And I think we've got 2 kind of streams to have a chat about here. One is how you got to the point where you did with Verve and the whys, wherefores and hows you managed to do your exit. And then we can talk about the coaching, the mentoring and things like that you do, because I think that overlaps really nicely to any of the agency owners listening right now as well.
Cool.
So first question. What has been one of your sort of personal biggest successes over the years of running Verve up to now? Is it a big pot of cash you got for selling it?
No, not at all, actually.
Good.
It's the funny thing with money is that it doesn't change anything really, other than the things that you obviously the logical things. So I think trying to sell an agency just for the money is likely not to get you to the sale of a business.
Yeah.
So I think my greatest success was in the teams that I built and the achievements that those people were able to do. And there's so many examples of proud moments, but most of them are all about seeing people go from juniors to seniors to heads of departments, and seeing them being able to make their own decisions and their own kind of path. And that's really is something really special. And then I would also say being able to do a lot of things that normally, especially in the SEO industry at that point, was like, that can't be done. And that for me was a huge motivator for striving for quality. It's like the more people said, look, that can't be done. You can't get link from this site or this site, or you won't be able to get that kind of quality links for poker clients, for example. Like those things really motivated me, and also motivated all the people at Verve, the Ververs.
Yeah, I mean, the first part there is absolutely key, isn't it? Into any agency growth, the people that you put in ultimately help you grow the business, and watching those people grow can feel fantastic. Yeah. There's going to be people who have different kind of cultural beliefs, upbringings, families, different things going on, so their motivations are always different as well. But watching someone go from a brand new junior all the way up to like a head of department, or even exiting the agency and becoming an owner of them of themselves or something like that is fantastic to see, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I had even as I exited, I had kind of mentored and helped one person to take over the agency, and so
Nice.
proud of him, of Jonas, for everything he's done after I exited as well. It's really lovely to see.
It's kind of like you've helped to leave the place in a safe set of hands, even though it's not yours anymore. It's nice to see it still grow, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I guess the other part of all of that is that, you know, you can feel proud of what you've left behind.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like you say at the beginning here, you know, it isn't necessarily about the money. And if you do go into selling an agency with a figure that you want to get, then it's going to hamper the exit. It's going to hamper the selling of the agency. It's got to be at the right time for the agency and for you, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a important factor. I think it's really useful to have a sum in mind, and I think there's nothing wrong with wanting money at all, or wanting to have the kind of success framework that usual society works by. There's nothing wrong with that, but it makes the journey a little bit harder if you concentrate on that. While if you concentrate on building a truly amazing business that looks and feels different from others, that is really where the quality comes. And selling an agency that's really good is a lot fucking easier than selling an agency that just churns over.
Absolutely. And to your point about saying people can't do something or you can't do that, knowing you personally, I know what you're like when someone says you can't do that, Lisa. And I can see how that, and just having looked at quite a lot of the things that Verve did in the past, I can see that was part of the leadership approach that you took, in that how people also had the same sort of mindset. I think that did set you up for some great growth based on everything that you can see.
And I think that one of the keys to, like, being able to do things that people think is impossible isn't really anything to do with what other people say, is how much you believe in yourself. And that was very much a key of growing the teams and the agency as a whole, was concentrating on getting people in a framework where they really believed in themselves and each other. Which, it shouldn't matter if, like, everyone else around you or other agencies or clients says something. If you think, you believe that you can, you just do.
Yeah, and it's often actually starting something is 90% of the task of actually getting it done. And when someone says you can't do it, either you don't try or you start doing it and you realize, okay, it isn't as possible this way, but I now know another route, or at least I know what isn't possible, and I know that for myself for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's also such a great characteristic of people in the SEO industry. Is that's kind of really the DNA of an SEO in the first place. Getting to a dead end and finding another way. So I think
there's kind of the scientific method approach there. You don't know it's not possible until you can prove it's not possible, and if it isn't possible, at least you've learned something along the way as well, which is always useful as well. So I guess if you could go back to when you founded Verve, is there something that you would, if you could take a time machine and go back, is there one thing that you would give yourself as a piece of advice?
Yes, don't take things so personally. I think one of the biggest challenges with being a leader is, especially if you really care about what you're building and you put you all into it, it's really challenging not to take things personally, and not feel personally connected to it. But if your actual identity becomes your work, then it becomes really hard once you have to take yourself out of it. And also, people think that being being a friendly, nice kind of boss is the right thing to do. But bringing up teams is very much like bringing up children. You need to help them have framework around and rules so that they feel safe. And at the start, I think I mistook being nice and friendly and friendships for leadership, and those really need to be different. And you have to be okay with not being liked, not being not always being understood your way of doing things, and that I found really challenging. And I think if I could somehow get to myself at that very early stage and say, look, that is the route of going down, getting so connected to things that that it becomes who you are, and it's gonna break you.
Yeah. I mean, to all the people who are listening right now who I ever employed, I'm sorry for doing that personally. I was terrible for taking things personally, especially if you have a bad day personally and then something professional happens, and everything in your business is, when it's yours, everything is personal in a sense. It's really hard to take a step back and remember that you're the leader, and you've got to follow the same vision and sing to the values that you set everyone else all the time. And I think it's part of the problem there. And I don't know what your thoughts are on this, because you mentor people. It's very easy to be a good doer, and then quite a lot of the doers start a business for themselves, an agency or whatever. But it's really hard to learn how to be a leader. And quite a lot of people start agencies off not being good leaders, but being good doers. And then it's really hard to take a step back when someone else is doing something that isn't exactly how you want it, or the result isn't exactly how you want it. And you feel this little, I used to make it in my head, it was a bit like waves crashing over a rock. It just slowly eroded my ability to keep calm. And you're spot on saying that.
I think that's very true for me as well. Like, I have a very high expectations of myself, and I think it is really important to know that people aren't you, and it doesn't mean that it's any worse or it's bad in any way. And you need to let people make their own mistakes, but it can be really challenging. And I was by no means in charge of that, in terms of like there's so many things that I would do differently now, but I think all you can do is the best that you can, but you have to concentrate on really making sure that this isn't you. Like, I think leadership is really important to know that that who you are as a person and a leader might be slightly different. And that's actually the opposite of what most people tell you, is that they're like,
true, yeah. It's not in the books.
Yeah, because you kind of have to realize that if things are really difficult, and I went through a really difficult period during COVID, which was my last year of burnout, and that was honestly the worst time in my career and probably my life, in terms of my mental state and how hard things were. But everyone was so charged and everyone was so worried about everything. Yeah. And when people come into a situation where they are already triggered and worried, it is very easy to blame on the management or the leadership. Yeah. And you have to learn that, because people will maybe project that, but you don't need to take it in. Yeah. And so I think one of the biggest advice I would give to someone that are growing an agency, and especially if they want to sell, is you have to get yourself a therapist. Because
so I shouldn't laugh, but that's like the 5th or 6th time an agency owner on this podcast has said that, and I'm only laughing because everyone agrees with you.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's really hard to do this without, and it would have been a lot worse for me if I hadn't. And being aware of because you're going to have to take the. Of course, if everyone is worried and everyone is scared, and it is fight or flight in that happens in
Yeah.
their brain without, it's not a conscious thing. And so making sure that you don't take that on as everything being your fault, and it's just really, really important.
Absolutely spot on. And I think various different people need different levels of professional support, and I think that's everything from talking to your mum
Yeah.
all the way through to professional therapy and everything in between, coaching, mentoring, and so on. But I think there's something to be said, and you're right, for kind of having something inside, like a mechanism where you can not detach, but you can be aware that you are not the business and the business is not you.
Yeah.
But you still need to be the right leader that
Exactly.
needs to be in the business. And I think that's quite powerful. Question though, if you did go back in time and give yourself that advice, would you listen to it?
Probably not.
Mm.
I was a right cocky early 30 something.
I don't believe it for a second, Lisa. I have no.
Yeah.
Nothing I know about you suggests that to be true. I think you're probably really easygoing and calm.
Yeah, that has never been words described about me. But it might be in the future.
Well, everyone's on a journey.
Yeah, exactly.
One day. So you built Verve from 0 up to 57, I think you say, and then you got to the point around exit. What is it that you kind of learned about the agency and the growth trajectory that you were on that made you sort of decide this was the right time?
So it's quite unusual actually, because in 2015 I really shook up the agency and changed a lot. And I always knew that I wanted to build to sell. And I'm not sure that my motivation at the start for that was money. I think it mostly was kind of, for me, I grew up with both my parents being bankrupt, so not ever having had the security of money. It was like a real.
Yeah,
but then
it's a bit of a motivator.
Yeah, but it's evolved a lot. But in 2015, as I said, the agency kind of turnover and profit and the results of what we're doing was actually really like plummeting. And we were at that point doing what we would then called content marketing, which was mostly writing content and getting links and stuff, which was really slow and not very helpful
Very
for
expensive
rankings
as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I had to make a very difficult decision, and I made nearly half, no, 40% of the agency redundant, and I closed down what was called the content team, and then started growing more of a production team for development and design, and then outreach, which is a slightly different to content marketing, because the outreach people was more like a PR and journalistic.
Yeah, they know how to talk to the people they're sending the emails to, rather than
And so from 2015 to when we sold, we literally were on like our profit had like halved from the year before in 2015, and we trebled profit until 2017 when we sold. And because we were on it was basically making that difficult decision that everyone hated me for, because it was wrong, and obviously people had to leave, and it was really, really tough.
Yeah.
But it was the right decision, and it was what allowed us to become the agency that we could be, and doing the great work, winning the awards. And so by 2016, we already had people come to us. And so actually Omnicom had already contacted us and was interested. I had to kind of hold them off because we weren't really at the profit margin I wanted to sell at.
Yeah.
And that kind of then I worked, of course, going back to this, with the advisory team to help the growth. Now, they also became my advisor on the actual M&A, which was super useful, but I'm not sure that they necessarily did that much in the growth period.
Yeah.
But it was all useful. So it wasn't actually that long between 2015, no real profit to talk about, to actual profit enough to sell.
And the right, so in a sense, at the point you got to a good revenue and profit figure was the right time in terms of the pivot between now I'm ready to sell, I've built to sell, and I'm ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think the biggest sign for me that we're ready is like, I think it was 2015 when I looked for a head of operation, someone that could do all the things that I wasn't very good at. So I basically wrote down a spreadsheet of all the things that I did, and then I put out all the things that I knew I wasn't good at or things I didn't like, and I made a job description of that. And that's how I found Bex, who then in the end became my COO. And you know, the one of the most important part of getting ready to sell is to be really honest with yourself, well, what you can do and what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And the change from when I got her on board and her doing those things where what was my blind spots was amazing. I could never have done this without her.
Absolutely. And I think the sale figure and the earnout time make a big difference depending on how much you physically do in the business and how much needs to be handed over, or how much is at risk if you don't hand over, and things like that. So having the right operational lead in there at the point of growth is essential, because you can't be the visionary and the implementer all the time. You can be good at some of it, but not all of it. And like you say, dichotomizing your abilities between things you like and things you can do versus things you don't really like and shouldn't do is key at any stage of agency growth, I think. Absolutely. And as soon as you can afford it, one of the things that I'd always advise to an agency owner is, as soon as you can afford it, get someone in on an operational level, whether it's at the start a project manager that you can upskill and bring into a COO level or something similar, because it will pay for itself in dividends in the future, whether it be systems, processes, or sometimes I found this really hard, I don't know about you, but being told no when something wasn't necessarily feasible, being told no and having a good person you can trust to say this is why, and you can kind of trust why, it's invaluable.
Yeah.
So,
and also I think it's really, for me, it was really invaluable to have, you know, me and Bex were very different in the way we worked and the way we thought, but our values were identical, I would say. Like, what we really think is important are respect, honesty, and kind of the value system was exactly the same. And you need to be able to really trust someone to kind of share that work. As entrepreneurs and founders, I think that's the biggest difference between entrepreneur CEOs and CEOs that have worked their way up as CEOs, is that you can't take away that thinking way as an entrepreneur, which is mostly go at 100 miles an hour, want to solve problems, like big problems, and go with it and be able to change and move and do things quickly. That kind of it's kind of like the heartbeat of a founding business and having the CEO there. But it could also, you know, it's very different to then being the CEO of an agency. Like for me, when I was a CEO and I was part of Omnicom, they felt like very different jobs.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine, and I think that your I guess your mindset around the business has to shift slightly around the long-term plans that you have personally and professionally, when you've effectively got new leaders in the larger scale, and part of that merge in is key to getting it right, and obviously having the right mindset is key.
Yeah, and I was totally unmanageable, so.
I think I can only imagine how I would have been in your shoes as well. Having exited the web development business that I had, I was terribly unmanageable, and that was a small business with very few staff. And again, if you're listening now, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I guess all of the stuff you did with Verve all the way through and going through the exit stage is probably set you up massively well for the agency coaching and mentorship that you do now. Do you feel that there's things that you've learned throughout that journey that you just couldn't learn from a book in order to help people in a similar position to you used to be?
Yeah, Absolutely, but and weirdly, most people that come to me think that they want help with those things like the processes and the what should we do in this scenario? What should we ask for? What is this sale process? All those things, but it's rarely that ends up being what I help them with, because the real um, the real the real challenge is setting yourself up for that growth and be the keeper of um, everyone's goals and ambition as well. And so it's I do all of those things, and I think is very beneficial. But mostly, I think it is hugely beneficial. Like I have 5 clients at the moment, and to be honest, I think that's almost as much as I can take, because you only when you're mentoring, you are literally talking, like I do like 3-hour sessions once a month with these people, and it's the space where you listen to them and feel their pain and their difficult challenges, but it's mostly about being able to understand it. What most people want from a psychological point of view is being heard. And leaders, because they're the ones making the decisions, they are heard, but they're not heard from a personal point of view and what they feel, because you can't say that. You can't say like, oh my God, I feel so upset about this. You can't say that to all your employees, because again, it's like a parental situation. It's not fair to tell your kids all your problems.
Exactly, and I think having had the experiences that you've had, similar to me, in a sense that if you haven't lived through it, you can only have sympathy for someone's problems. If you have real empathy because you were there, you felt similar feelings, you had similar issues, then it means that you actually do listen better. And I think listening to the real problem and then understanding through empathy the problem that caused, or behind the problem, you can really get to the kernel of truth, the thing that really actually helps them to either you can either sort of coach them past the problem or mentor them into their own solution. And it really does depend on the context of the problem. But if you haven't kind of had an experience similar to that and you just learned in a book how to be a coach, then you're not necessarily, like you say, listening and hearing properly.
And I think the biggest challenge for people when they looking for a mentor is obviously looking for someone that have done similar things. I think is very useful. But again, what I mostly do is not. They tend to look for someone that could tell them stuff. But what I really do is help them question stuff, and for them to come up with their own way of what is right for them. Because even if I've done what looks like exactly the same route, it is it's so individual, because it's all about people. An agency isn't the same as another agency, because it has the same amount of people and they do the same thing. All those individual makes that a completely different business. It's chemistry. It is a completely different business. So to be able to successfully really mentor and help people through something, you have to ask the right question so that they can come up with the answer that is right for them. And that's basically, I think, in my head, mentoring is mirroring to help them get to that bit. And quite often CEOs and founders don't have those people that they can do that with. And I also have like a very big interest within psychology and neuroscience, and I'm doing a lot of personal studies now, but also possibly starting a degree in September. And it's just so interesting to be able to help people get more of their own ideas, their own thoughts, because it's often the insecurities that are keeping them from making the right decision, because it's a hesitation thing. So quite often the right question is, what will happen if you don't do that, rather than what will happen if you do that.
There's like a non-judgmental curiosity that is required.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in all of the years that you've been doing the agency running and all of the stuff with Verve, the exit is finalised now, and obviously you're working to help support people in who run agencies and other businesses to sort of mentor them into the right sort of mindset and success. What would you, if I was if say for example a potential agency owner of the future was listening, someone who is thinking about starting an agency or has literally just started an agency, what would you tell them as from the coaching and mentor perspective as a piece of advice to take away?
Concentrate on making good teams and do great work, and make sure that you have other outlets for you.
Yeah.
That I think will be the summary. It's difficult to say because again, it all depends on their thinking. But it's going to be a lot more fun than you think, and it's going to be a lot harder than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for coming along, Lisa. It's been great to have you on the podcast. And in our next podcast, we'll have a different agency owner director telling us their story. So until then, enjoy.